All right, today we're going to be talking about evil, what it is, why it exists, and how to maneuver it in this day and age. Because as we're seeing in the world, a lot of the people in power are exhibiting many characteristics that we would call evil, right? Or negative entities that are taking control over the masses, or to be honest, have been controlling the masses for many millennia, but is now becoming more apparent and more conspicuous than ever. So we start off with what is evil, answering this very simple question. Evil is the privation of good. Negative actions are diminished good actions. When I mean privation, I just mean lower amounts of. It's the same thing, but at a lower degree. Think of it like hot and cold. Temperature. Hot and cold, it's all heat. It's all particles moving. But the less the particles moving or vibrating or interacting with each other, the colder it gets. It's what you're tracking is you're tracking particle interactions, particle motions, or atomic. There's no point definitively where hot becomes cold. It depends on your perspective. But the sensation, the experience of cold is real. And a different person will say something is cold, or a different aperture or a different object or a different perspective will determine something is cold or not. Like for a biological quantum computer, absolute zero, colder than space, is actually perfect temperature. For humans, 75 degrees, 70 degrees in Fahrenheit. Decent, right? But it depends. Some people like 60, some people like lower, some people like higher. I like 80 to 100. I'm weird like that. Same with light and dark. Light is the positive. It is the photons. Let's say it is the electromagnetic fabric being excited. So I believe it's wave excitations or electromagnetic excitations. Dark is the absence of light. So you don't add dark particles to make things dark, you take away light. Same thing, hot, you take away hot to get to cold. But heat is all there is. Light is all there is, you just take it away, you block it, you block the access to it. Therefore, good is the default. Good is the baseline, it's the positive content. And then evil is the diminishment, the repression, the blocking of that good that is inherent and natural to the universe. Unity is the default. This is what I would call good. Wholeness, love, coherence, bliss, sustains existence independently. Evil can't exist without it. So unity, love, bliss can exist without evil. But evil cannot exist without good. Just like you can't have separation without unity, but you can have unity without separation. Now, you wouldn't define it as unity, you would just define it as it is. But for something to exist distinct as a distinct thing, separate from something, there must be something to be separate from. Where unity is just, it just is, it's inherent, it's self-validating, it's self-evident. It does not require its polar opposite to exist, just like hot does not need to have cold to exist, it's just a perspective. Light does not need dark to exist, it can be all light, okay? But to experience that light, that contrast, you need that dark. Separation. So this is the opposite of unity, right? This is where evil comes in. Fear, anger, desire, lack, hatred. So these are negative emotions. These are positive feelings, positive experiences, negative things. We intuitively already understand this, but we haven't really articulated it in modern society for whatever reason. Destroys the host. So when you have these negative emotions, it's destroying the person holding these emotions, the society that's operating under these emotions, or the environment that it's in. It's parasitic off the positive pole. There is no hard line. So to define something as evil is that entity degrading the very thing it requires to exist? A parasite is the perfect example. Or, to keep it real relevant, cancer. Cancer destroys the host that it needs to exist as itself. It is self-destructive because it is destroying the very medium by which it can exist. Cancer, to give this example, right? Cancer requires health to exist, meaning that if a person dies from cancer, the cancer can no longer exist. It destroys itself, right? With the person goes the cancer. So cancer requires a somewhat level of health in the entity that it is attached to, siphoning off life force energy from, requires that to exist. Lies require truth to exist. Truth does not require lies to exist. For lies to take hold, there must be truth to be distorted. Okay? For unity for separation or for destruction to happen, there must be unity, there must be structure, there must be coherence. For incoherence. And incoherence, lies, evil, degrades the very medium it needs to exist. It is a contradiction. It is self-destructive. It is self-refuting. So many spiritual, more so contemplative traditions, indigenous traditions as well, see the ultimate reality as love, bliss, unity, and peace. All is one. Negativity needs separation, meaning to experience any of the negative emotions, there requires an other. There requires a separate thing to hate, to be angry at, to be afraid of. To feel pain or feel suffering inflicted upon oneself, it must be feeling like something is external, okay? Or separate, even from yourself. There has to be this feeling of lack or separation or distinctness. Separation is the key to understanding evil. And this is going to tie into a lot of the, let's say, contemplative traditions, like I've said before, and they've been pointing at this the entire time. The source of all experience of evil and suffering is separation. Evil entities are extremely separated from source, from connected to other entities. They see themselves as distinct. And the way that they maintain that separation usually is through coercion, force, supremacy, oppression, mutilation, and destruction. There is an over-identification with the finite being, with the form, with the distinctness. This is part of the reason why contemplative traditions like Buddhism or even Hinduism or Taoism warns against over-identifying with the body or with the ego or with the individualized self, because this is the fertile ground for evil to manifest. And again, what is determined as evil is relative, right? Everyone has a different threshold of when evil begins and good ends and evil begins. There's no hard line. But there are certain actions that are just so evil that it's almost universal, right? There's, I'm not even going to get into it because I'm not trying to get in trouble on YouTube, but use your imagination, taking another life for the fun of it or not for a good reason, things like that. There are things that degrade the existence. Same thing with murder, right? Murder requires life to exist, meaning that if everyone was a murderer, nothing would exist because everything would destroy itself. So murderers or thieves require people to have possessions, be honest, or to have good health and to be alive for that thing to even exist itself. It's again, self-destructive, self-refuting because it destroys the thing that it needs to exist. Negative entities are self-serving. They see themselves as distinct from source, from other entities, fully and completely. They must feed off the energy of others. Lack connection, love, empathy, and service. Power, supremacy, hierarchy, and conflict are their MO. That is their lifeblood. That is their motivator, their engine that moves them forward and inspires them. That's their goals. That's their purpose, is to seek these things. And better than power is coercion or force. Feed off negative energy that increases separation. So what they do is that they inflict suffering onto other entities to elicit that negative emotional energy, which creates that separation of I'm experiencing pleasure, desire, power, supremacy, and you are feeling inferior, pain, suffering. And that distinction between these two emotional states feeds that separating force that gives them more and more power. You can see this with certain entities like Donald Trump or Netanyahu, right? Or historical figures like Genghis Khan or Rasputin. These are service to self entities that through inflicting suffering and pain onto other people, they gain this feeling of power. Epstein, who's probably going to be on the thumbnail. Epstein, I almost forgot Epstein, who I'm going to put on the thumbnail. Epstein is the perfect example. This is what you see. This is where you're like, why are they hurting innocence? I don't understand why children, because it creates this ultimate separation of I am supremely powerful and you are supremely weak. And that gap, that power differential, which people are becoming more mindful of in the present day, that power differential gives me energy, fuels them. Evil is a product of free will, though. of a free will universe. Because then you're thinking, okay, well, this sounds awful. Why is this even a thing? Well, because separation is required for anything to manifest. And with any separation, there is the capacity for evil to birth, to grow, to fester, however you want to define it, to calcify. Because separation is required for anything to manifest. For me to be a mirror, to be a distinct thing, you to be your own person, there needs to be separation, there needs to be distinction. Even though we're all part of the same one whole, there needs to be this dance of separation and distinction and transformation. But with that separation, there is the capacity for me over-identifying with my separation and doing things at your expense to feed my own ego, to feed my own, let's say, negative source, negative entity. And negative entities are just the continuous choosing over and over again to be separate and superior and different than others. So any entity that would be in the historical record or be presenting itself as God, separate from its creation, or a certain group of people being separate from others as superior or better, is a negative entity. Let's just to keep it a buck, to keep it fully transparent. But evil is a product of a free will universe. Freedom to contradict, to destruct, be self-destructive, self-refuting, to destroy the very medians of which it requires to exist. All is God's source one. It is unsustainable evil because it is destroying the things that it needs to survive. This is why cancer is unsustainable. This is why parasitic entities are unsustainable, because unless they can try to hop to a new host, but again, over time, the energy just becomes too great and they die. Think of, a negative entity is a predator. It requires other entities to siphon off their energy. It's predator, predation. This is why the Epstein class, the elite class, the power structure class that is carrying out these heinous acts is best described as the predator class, not the elite power class, even though that is important to them. And we've fed into this because we've been deluded and brainwashed into believing that power and supremacy are good things that should be achieved and admired. But that's how they get you. That's how they siphon off the energy. They put them on a pedestal. You're feeding that dynamic. You're feeding that separation. You're feeling more separate, but in a more inferior sense, and they're feeling more separate in a superior sense. So be mindful of hero worship, because this feeds this beast. Takes two to tango. It's not just the predator class, it's also the masses that feed into it and allow them to be actually above the law. They think they're above the law. No, they actually are above the law. People treat them like they're deities. And with that comes the heinous shit we've been seeing in the world over the past decade. So modern society also, is what I was saying before, brainwashes us, right? Modern society does this. The materialistic, physicalist doctrine, you are the body, separation is all there is. It leads to isolation, nihilism, materialism, and this over-attachment to independence. Not saying independence is inherently wrong or bad, because again, you need independence, you need separation to exist. So there is gratitude that we can have for our separation, for our independence, for our autonomy, for isolation to a certain degree. But it is the current modern society that reinforces this and says that the material world is all there is, or let's say the lower vibrational matter world is all there is, prioritizing our independence, our supremacy, our power, the things that we can acquire through money and status. That's going to lead to these feelings of isolation, nihilism, depression, anxiety, fear, because it's incongruent with how reality actually is. It's incongruent with how reality actually is, because everything is one. Everything is part of the same spiritual organism in creation. The epidemic of loneliness, mental health, meaninglessness is a product of this false belief that has been posited most strongly by Western society. Okay? Western European white people for the most part. Now, we've all bought into it, but that's kind of where it really took the most root, and we've lost the forest for the trees. There is currently a war for human consciousness, because we're reaching a tipping point. We're reaching a very historical moment in human history, in human evolution, if that's not already obvious, that yes, this is unprecedented times. It's not just in our heads. This is not happening like it used to happen before. It's happening rapidly and intensely, and perhaps for the last time. Modern suffering is from the increasing separation, felt feelings of separation from self and source and from others, and believing the materialistic trap, believing in hero worship and status and power. And I don't need this person. I don't need this type of this entity. I don't need to connect. No, we're humans, we're mammals, we're meant to connect. We are stronger together than apart. Looking at others as adversaries or looking at a group of people as the problem singularly is short-sighted, right? That's what I'm saying. Obviously, most popular is white people when it comes to this materialism, but it's not everyone. And I was part of the same machine. I was an atheist. I fell into the nihilistic, materialistic trap myself. So anyone can get it. Anyone can fall into the trap. It is not to point fingers overtly. It's just to track where it's actually coming from, right? And so we need to be mindful of the internal and external. Unity, love, connection, congruence, external and internally. You can have separation internally as well, and it will be reflected in the external, always. This is the concept of the shadow, right? Or the discarded parts of oneself, or the lost inner child, or things like that, or fractured souls, or fractured personalities, fractured subpersonalities. Evil can't sustain itself. It needs people in negative states to feed it. So to combat or to dissolve the evil that is in the world, we must heal ourselves. Go on our own healing journey. Do the work internally to align all the parts of ourselves that are separated. To unify our internal state, to be congruent with ourselves and our purpose and our meaning, whatever that may be for you. And then connecting with others. Because as a community, we are stronger. And as we connect with ourselves, the different parts of ourselves that have been discarded and lost and separated because of the evil we've encountered in the world or experienced indirectly or directly. And this is what trauma is this experience of separation, and it leads to that internal fraction. And then healing ourselves and other people. And if you want help healing internally so that it reflects itself externally, I have a transformation guide down below where you can start to connect with the different parts of yourself that have been disconnected and separated. So you are stronger and more resilient against the rising evil in this world that is currently here for us to face.